Today's guest is Krithika Chandramouli. She's a software engineer at Meta, which is a company many of you heard. Some maybe not as familiar with the name change, although they're working really hard to make sure we know it's called Meta instead of Facebook. But thank you for joining me today, Krithika.
Thanks so much for having me here, Jeremy.
So for people who haven't had a chance to get to know you, talk a bit about your background, where you're from, who you are, and what you do.
My name is Krithika, and I was born and brought up in India. And I moved to the United States in 2012 to get a master's degree at UCLA, and I've been here ever since.
No, okay, no, hold on. You're from India, so how do you end up? So that means if you got your master's degree here, so you started primary education though in India?
I did, yeah. I went through schooling and undergraduate studies in India.
So then what brought you to California?
I really have to say, funnily enough, that it was fate. Because really, like when I started off on my career, I actually studied to become a biomedical engineer. So I got my bachelor's in biomedical engineering, and when I was applying to graduate programs, I was also applying for um, related fields like bioengineering. And I got into UCLA, and I was like, I am going for sure to UCLA. It was just such an aspirational place to be in for so many of my peers, and even for me back then. But like eventually when I landed in LA and I started with school, I ended up switching and got a master's in computer science, which is something I would have never imagined in my life, to be very honest. But that's why I say it's fate. I just had to end up in UCLA, and my path kind of sort of like it started navigating itself almost. And I've ended up in the tech industry now.
Is there a specific focus you went to school for in the tech industry? So like, are you programming?
So
Are you
initially when
networking?
I started,
Go ahead.
yeah, when I started my master's in bioengineering, I didn't really have a specialization, and I had some time to choose. I didn't, I could take some time to choose my major. And back then, and this is like 10 years ago, like, there was a lab that was doing something super interesting. And what it is, you'll ask me. Um, it was basically wearable sensors. So, like you wear something on your wrist, and it tells you how many steps you've taken, and it tells you how fast you walked. And does it sound familiar?
Yeah, it
It's like
does.
an Apple Watch. Yeah, yeah. But back then it was all happening in labs like these. And I thought this is so interesting, and this is such a cool application of software in the field of health. And I went and like I talked to the prof, and I was like, I find this interesting. Can I just come work in your lab, see what you're doing, help out in any way? And he's like, yeah, come to my lab, and you have to write an Android application. I was like, oh, I've never written an Android application, but I guess I'll learn. And started teaching myself uh, how to write Android apps, and that's where I started.
Wow, that's very interesting. That is unusual, right? That just going in the lab and having a chance to experiment a little bit. So now, how did that turn into your first job out of university?
It was a slightly longer path. I had to stay in school for longer. What happened from that point onwards is that I realized I really enjoy coding.
Hmm.
and I enjoy, seeing my software in action. So I'm going to learn a little more about the field in general. And that's when I started to take a lot of CS degrees uh, in my spare time. And slowly from spare time, it became to like a full-time thing where I was, all the courses that I was taking were in the computer science program. And eventually I was able to uh, translate that to a degree. But even with a degree, to be very honest, graduating from UCLA, I did feel a little underconfident because I felt like, okay, I don't actually have uh, like a bachelor's uh, in computer science. I'm kind of it's something I've been doing recently in the last 2 years. I don't know what's going to happen. I was a little underconfident. But then I landed a job very luckily. Of course, after interviewing at this, it wasn't a startup. It was like an LLC. It was a part of DreamWorks Animation. They were
Oh.
based in LA, and they were trying to build the next Google Play service back then. It was like a pay-per-view entertainment service. You could purchase a movie, or you could purchase like a single episode of a TV show. Um, so I landed there, and that's where my real learning actually started.
Hmm. Yeah, this is something I tell a lot of people. I have my college degrees from in computer science, but um, none of that stuff that you do there ever really translates well to doing the real job. And so then it's like all, like you said, that's when your real education started. So when you had to solve the problems that you're going to get paid to do.
Right. Yeah. And it's so interesting that for me personally, in my whatever courses I took and my journey through grad school, I realized that there was a lot of stuff we learned about in a very controlled environment with no real world applications,
Mm.
which is a bit unfair to say because a lot of research is like is born that way. A lot of innovation happens that way, but still I think for me I was able to only like wrap my head around how scalable systems are built when I actually had a chance to work on one.
Mm. I love that. I love that you say that, because you're right. I mean, college provides a great foundation, right? It gets our brains moving in the right direction, gives us some solid background and things to rely on. But they're not teaching people today. If you were to go to college today for a computer science degree, they're not teaching you, how to stand up an AWS instance of something, right? Of anything, or some sort of pipeline for software development, right? They're teaching you probably still Java in some cases, maybe some JavaScript, but it's not what the real world application. So I love that you've mentioned that. So what was next after? So how did that go? Right, you're in this now you're in this constant learning and producing mode. Did that get rid
It
of some of
was
your fear?
it was interesting, I have to be honest. When I on my first day at the job, I actually didn't know how Git worked.
No,
It was
right.
now I'm embarrassed about it, but back then I was like, okay, I don't know. I don't even know how Git works, but somehow I'm going to learn and I'm going to see how it goes. Luckily for me, I had such wonderful mentors uh, who gave me the space to learn and also apply myself, um, and be creative because uh, I don't know how many people will agree with this, but building great software is a way of expressing your creativity,
Mhm.
and how you implement your solutions, and how you're thinking about the problem, how you're thinking about the future of the problem. And so uh, I had a lot of guidance and space to learn about all these things, and it actually went really well for me. And yeah, I'd say it was like my launch pad, because then I went from there to another very amazing place to work at. It's called FactSet. It was they are headquartered in Connecticut,
Hmm.
and they build software for financial institutions. So a completely different pace of working, completely different context, but still so much to learn. And this was me working on an enterprise software. So like a different mode of working, different process of working. Um, that that transition was very interesting, because I went from like doing open source and hacking things together, to actually working on something that people pay to use. Um, like FactSet, very much like the Bloomberg terminal is a, like a subscription based software. So these big investment firms will pay to use the software. So it was an interesting shift, I'd say.
Yeah, that is different. That also illustrates another cool thing about being in the IT field is just change companies and you get to learn a whole new business. Uh,
Yeah.
and because you're building software, I think that's the awesome thing about building software. I'm a software engineer like you. I love building software, and I love it when I go from one company to the next, and I go into two completely different industries where I get to learn how that industry works so that I can build software for them.
Yeah, actually, when we were talking about college education versus real life, the one thing that I suddenly thought about is that more than anything, like I think I learned how to be um, to adapt to the problem at hand, and adapt to finding solutions to a certain problem. And I think that's what software engineering is all about in its various applications. And that that's the one skill that I think any software engineer should have at the end of the day, is, yeah, like to be able to plug yourself into um, any team structure, any product, and start getting creative, start finding solutions.
Hmm. That's yes, absolutely. So what eventually brought you to Meta?
um it was, it happened so randomly. I was just on LinkedIn one day, and this recruiter, she's reached out to me. She's at Facebook, then Facebook, now Meta. And at the time, I thought to myself, I don't know if I can actually take on a tech interview at a place like Facebook. But I'm going to give it a shot. Let's see how it goes. And this was actually, I wasn't even interviewing, I wasn't looking for jobs, but this was the one interview I was like, I should attempt it. I should see how
Mm-hmm.
it goes. And that's exactly what I did. um so I can't there isn't like a big grand story behind it, apart from the fact that I just decided to see what happens. Because back then and even now, I'm so thankful for the opportunity to be working at a place like Meta. Not trying to upsell the place where I work, but just saying that I'm happy. Um, and it's actually interesting that when I interviewed and I got the job offer, it was for a program called the Rotational Engineering Program.
Hmm.
And what that is a 1 year program where you get to, perform as a software engineer on two different teams. So 6 months on one team and 6 months on another team. And at the end of it, um, yeah, you go through performance evaluation and you get a full-time offer to continue to work at Meta. So that's the program that I was on. Um, I thought that it was like, again, it was a change of context, change of scale. Suddenly I went from working on this very relaxed paced company that wants to take its time to build software, following client specifications, to a company like Facebook where there's a lot more creative freedom to do and build what we want to build as engineers.
Hmm.
So yeah, that was an interesting shift in pace for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Yeah. So as you've gone through this career, what's something you've seen that you wish we did differently? That if we came to you, Kritika, and said, you have the power to make us change, or if the change is too large, maybe it's something that you've seen that it's just too hard to change, something we should at least consider changing. What might that be for you?
I definitely think that we should be looking at mentorship a little more holistically.
Hmm.
And why mentorship is so important to me is because for me in my personal journey, I have greatly benefited from having, some very understanding and patient mentors who are, leaders at the end of the day. Um, and I think that this doesn't get talked about enough, about how we can build cultures, not just tech, in tech, of course, but then in any organization, how we can build that sort of a culture which promotes supporting your peers, supporting people around you to do their best work and bring their best foot forward. I think that's one thing that it needs to be talked about more.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. Giving the people we work for, giving us that support. I totally get what you're saying. That's a passion of mine, is mentoring early career people. So I'm totally on board. We definitely need to do that better. And we find ways to, and Gen Z, is going to require it. I've done a lot of research into the generations, and Gen Z expects mentorship. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, and I think that's also the way to go because I feel like with every generation they have their own they have their own protocol, they have their own way of doing things, they have their own mode of operation. But um, there's some knowledge. I feel like mentorship is almost like passing down tribal knowledge,
Hmm.
knowledge about how, like, um, about the values that we or like people before us have carried with them to kind of succeed and build all these impressive, amazing technologies, and how innovation is continuing to happen, and how these foundations have been built. I feel like it's so important to talk about that, to pass that down and pass that, pay it forward to the future generations, Gen Z.
Agreed. So what's coming up for you in the new year?
So I'm excited to have been invited to speak at a conference, which I've had my eyes on for the longest time, being a woman who is in the tech industry. The conference is called Women Who Code, Empower, Connect, and it's a virtual conference. It's happening in March next year, 2023. And I'm actually going to be talking about an interesting topic. I find it interesting. I hope my listeners will as well. I'm going to be talking about building resilience in the face of layoffs because
Mm,
you know we've all been reading the news and it's quite scary for everyone in the tech industry. We've been seeing so many layoffs, big and small, and I feel like as organizations go through this, we need to be able to um, have conversations, not just about how we can keep carrying on, but also about how we can support people around us. And, that's how we can thrive as an industry. Um, I've uh, uh, seen layoffs. I've seen them happening around me. I've experienced a layoff. So um, I can say that I've experienced a range of emotions when it comes to layoffs.
right.
Um, yeah, so that's what I'll be talking about.
Fantastic. Well, and we'll make sure to put a link. I'll put a link in the episode so people can register and definitely attend your session. So thank you for joining me today, Kritika. It's been an awesome conversation to hear a bit about your journey, and I look forward to seeing what's next for you.
Thank you so much for having me, Jim.